Welcome to the Brewer Fanatic special live stream podcast. I'm Brock Beauchamp. Sorry for the late start. This is Matt Trueblood. My microphone's been malfunctioning, and then I just spoke to no one for 2 minutes. So this is my second intro into this. Welcome. The Brewers have traded Freddy Peralta to the New York Mets for number 3 prospect Jet Williams and number 5 prospect Brandon Sproat. Matt, take it away while I try to finish setting this up.
Yeah, I think it is very much the shape of deal and certainly one of the destinations that we would have most predicted. It's more the timing that's caught us all a little bit by surprise, maybe. Although even that, it feels like it's been building toward this for a couple of weeks. And the Brewers got essentially what they always look for in a deal like this. Both a controllable starting pitcher, which was sort of a deal breaker for them as they were approaching teams throughout the winter or as teams were approaching them about Peralta. And also a prospect who I don't think Jet Williams can step right into the big league lineup. He may be able to if that was what was required, but given what the Brewers have, it's really not. And so, but by midseason, he's probably going to be ready for a look in the majors. And a diverse skill set, a lot of team control for both guys. Sproat is a power arm. I mean, this guy can get up to 100 when he's working in shorter stints. I think he'll probably stick as a starter for the Brewers, and so that velocity will sit more in the mid to, pushing toward the upper 90s when the adrenaline's going. But it's an impressive haul, and obviously for an impressive pitcher who's also on a great deal. So that explains that part.
Yeah, I mean, as always, Matt Arnold is willing to wait for his deal to come along, and he is ready to pounce whenever that happens. I was unsure based on what the Brewers had gotten for Devin Williams and Corbin Burns that they were going to be able to get 2 top 100 prospects for Peralta, but that's what they did, and I'm sure a little bit of Mets desperation from David Stearns played into account here.
Yeah, a little bit. I don't even think I want to call it desperation. The Mets eliminated their own desperation over the last week, signing Beauchamp, trading for Luis Robert Jr. They had filled what were the big holes left in their roster by sort of the weird winter they'd had up to that point. What they needed to cap it all was a frontline starter. And it's actually really, I don't want to use the word sweet, but there's something very poignant about David Stearns going and getting Freddy Peralta again.
Yes, there is.
He went and got him his first winter on the job as Brewers, I think then GM, in December of 2015. Just a minor trade, but that's the guy he picked up, and that turned into one of his best success stories as the Brewers executive. And obviously, the extension that they got together on in early 2020 has been great for both sides. And now Stearns and Peralta get back together again. And I think in a way that's also beneficial to the Brewers, or they would not have done it. But you could almost see this coming just in that, of course, David Stearns wanted Peralta again. He knows not only the player and all the talent there, but the personality, which is one of the things that the Brewers are going to miss the most. He's so great in the clubhouse, became such a beloved leader, especially for the Latin American guys in there. And so that part is something that the Brewers will have to find ways to make up for. But it's a great package of talent that they're getting back.
Yeah, and I'm sure Stearns was a little bit willing to go higher on Peralta, knowing him. And one has to believe that a Mets extension is probably on its way. I mean, why wouldn't he? And the Mets have that kind of disposable income, and why not?
Yeah, I mean, just 1 year from free agency, maybe Peralta wants to play it out because you get that true market rate deal, totally unfettered that way. But it would not shock me at all if the two sides got together, because they've already done a deal before, David Stearns and Peralta and his representatives. And obviously the Mets pockets are so deep. I do think, what they're getting back is a fair return for the 1 year of Freddy. And it's not one of those deals where, well, this was only going to get done if the Mets could be sure of an extension. it's still a fair price rather than the Brewers obviously did not fleece David Stearns. Working with David Stearns, knowing David Stearns, they knew that wasn't going to happen. And you can find people who are a little bit lower on both Sproat and Williams for various reasons. I think you referred to him as both as top 100 prospects. I think there may be one or two lists where Williams doesn't make that list, even though on other lists he's going to be well into the top 50. He's one of those high volatility guys, really small frame. Some questions about the defensive home. Ultimately, his best defensive home might be second base, which is a slightly weird fit for this team, right?
Yeah, it is. But
he's fast enough to also be a good outfielder. The versatility is great, and the profile at the plate is kind of just everything a little bit bigger and louder Caleb Durbin, but without obviously the elite contact skills that Caleb Durbin gets from being so compact to the baseball. So it's a really interesting pair of players that they brought in, and I think high volatility, but also very close to big league ready in one case, and in the other case, Sproat has already tasted the major leagues. He's going to be able, maybe not to step in from opening day because the Brewers have a deep pitching staff, but he can help them right away this year.
Yeah, and speaking of the pitching staff, let's flip on over to I have the Fangraphs projections for the top. I grabbed like 10 or 12 guys there. How do you see the 2026 rotation shaking out without Peralta at the top?
It's a good question. I mean, I think who starts on opening day, that'll almost be as ceremonial as anything else. If Brandon Woodruff's healthy, you just give the ball to him, don't you? Right?
Yeah, I'm using opening day more as who's going to front the rotation, because opening day, it matters once, and then there's 161 more games to play.
Exactly. And I think, obviously, we would all love the answer to that to be Jacob Misiorowski.
Yeah.
I think I'm a Quinn Priester believer, man. He came along so impressively last year. It wasn't just that he came in and they had the immediate fixes for him. He also evolved as the year went on. And so I think Jack Stern has actually written about this offseason even, that there may be one more ratchet, one more level, one more half a step up for Quinn Priester to take. So if you're asking me, I don't know, I'm not big on WAR, you know that. But
yeah,
if you're asking me who's going to lead the Brewers in pitching WAR in 2026, I'll probably take Priester. I trust him to stay on the mound. He's not going to have some of the blow-up starts that I think Misiorowski and some of the others might still be prone to. And I do think he can take it up that one more little level. But the real strength of this group is, and now including Sproat, it goes 6, 7, 8 guys deep, and you haven't found anyone that you really are uneasy about handing the ball to for at least a few turns through the rotation.
Yeah, and that's going to be really interesting to see. I mean, obviously at the top you have Miz, Woody, and then Priester. And, Miz and Woodruff, unfortunately, you just don't know how many innings you're going to get out of them at this point, even more so than your typical pitcher. But then how do you see the last two spots shaking out? Because you're going to have legitimately 6 or more guys on, I would say at least 5 guys on opening day, and then possibly 6 or 7 shortly thereafter, who could be viable starters. Everybody from DL Hall to up to, Logan Henderson, Tobias Myers, who had the great 2024, didn't get much of a shot in 2025 in the Brewers rotation. Where are the Brewers going to go with those last 2 spots?
Well, you missed this one last update to the deal. One guy it's not going to be is Tobias Myers because he's a New York Met now.
Yeah. Okay. Well, strike him from the record. That's an interesting addition. So to get it over the line, to get the 2 Mets prospects, they had to add Myers into the deal.
Yeah, I think from what I understand, the Brewers particularly, Williams was sort of agreed upon, but the Brewers wanted access to that top tier of Mets pitching prospects. And to get that done, the Mets wanted one more arm thrown in so that they would be assured of some depth. The Brewers can afford to trade Myers because of the guys you just listed. I think how the back end of the rotation plays out is going to come down a lot to health again, because
Yeah.
tell me which one of Henderson and Hall, or Aaron Ashby, if he's
Ashby. Yeah.
out one more time, tell me which one of those guys stays healthy, and I'll tell you which one, locks up a rotation spot, because they all have those tools. I think Hall a little bit less. If I'm the Brewers,
Yeah.
I'm saying, DL, just give me one inning at a time, man, and let's keep you as healthy as we can. We can even keep you on a kind of a schedule.
Yeah, even using them, as on a semi-schedule, get 2 or 3 innings.
Right.
If you want to use him as a long man, I think that's a really viable way to use Hall with his diminished fastball. I would have to think that this changes the outlook for Aaron Ashby a fair amount.
Yeah, well, the fact that they got Sproat back clouds it a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And let's find out when we go to spring training just how serious they are about giving Angel Serpa a look as a starter. I kind of feel like not very serious. I think that was just sort of thrown out off the cuff, but we'll see. The one guy I would lock in. So you've got the top 3, and the big question there is Woody going to be able to stay on the mound, that kind of stuff. The fourth one, to me, I'm locking in Chad Patrick, because the slurve that he sort of developed, whatever you want to call it, I think he calls it a sweeper maybe, but however you tag that pitch, the breaking ball that he discovered during his stint in the minors in the latter part of the season, I think that pitch is going to take him to that next level and make him capable of being a mid-rotation starter. So I want Patrick in that 4 spot, and then I'll figure out, which of the rest of the guys is healthy, use the options I have available, to minor leagues, do it that way. I'm not as sure that that's how the Brewers view it, so we'll see where that goes again once they get to Maryville.
Yeah, and they're not the Brewers, if anybody, are not afraid to be experimental with all of it and try some really weird combinations. Here's a comment. Says DL Hall has been healthy and sitting 98 miles per hour in off-season pitching. This is a little bit early for best shape of his life posts, but we're going to get those, and that would be fantastic if DL Hall has a velocity back up. But also, what does that fastball look like now is maybe as important, if not more, than the velocity. Jack Starr has talked about this a ton, and it's not just the velo with Hall, it's the shape of that fastball has really deteriorated in the past 2 years.
Yeah, and what he has to do mechanically to get to the right shapes. Because that when he's had his fastball shape working the best at times in the past, his mechanics have been altered in a way that sort of interfered with him throwing any of his secondaries as well as otherwise can. It's like, I'm not sure that I can line up enough of the tumblers to make DL Hall a good starting pitcher. I can't keep him healthy and with the positive fastball shape and the secondaries working the way they need to so that he can turn over a lineup every 5th day. I do think I can get 2 out of those 3 right at any given time and have a pretty good medium to high leverage reliever. So that's where I would be putting the eggs, especially now that you traded Peralta out but brought back a starter as well.
Yes. It just, of all the guys that you're going to try in the rotation, it feels like DL Hall's maybe one of the bigger stretches. And with this many pieces in play, I don't know why the attention would be focused in that direction. Like you said, Chad Patrick's a better option. I think Aaron Ashby's a better option, certainly better option than Hall. Logan Henderson might be one, probably not on opening day.
Well, and we've gone really far into this conversation without even saying Robert Gasser's name. So, I mean,
right.
Again,
there you go.
Man, pitching depth will make you the envy of every team, and the Brewers have it. I think the really interesting thing here, almost more interesting than how Sproat fits into the picture, because I really think it's kind of just he goes to camp and they see who wins that starting job. Murph has been very comfortable holding that spot open the last couple of years. It's almost more interesting what Jet Williams is where are they going to play him during spring? That was a big drama around Durbin last year. Could they really make a third base? Can they really make, I don't know, a center fielder out of Jet Williams? Or do they want to try him one more time at shortstop? Something like that, because that's when things get really interesting. If he can be the right kind of fit to have a big impact on the 2026 Brewers, and as opposed to being more of a medium-term play with the tools.
Yeah, and I pulled up Jet Williams' past couple years of stats in the minor leagues, and as you can see, he is yet another short king. The Brewers are just collecting them left and right. Sorry, my camera's out of focus. See if that will help. It does not. Drafted in 2022 in the first round by the Mets, and Matt, you know a lot more about his defensive tools than I do. You want to run through what people might expect from him?
It's plus speed, but a below average arm. The actions were pretty rough, in his first couple tastes of pro ball, but there were also some injuries that interrupted his development early in his pro career. I think scouts are a little more confident now that he's a guy who can stick somewhere on the dirt. Because the arm's not super strong, the bias is toward putting him at second. But like we mentioned before, boy, that's weird on the Brewers, where you're pretty sure you want Bryce Terang at second base for as long as you can absolutely hold on to him.
Yeah.
Durbin was kind of this guy last year. The footwork, man, when I got to spring training last year, it was still February, so like early stages. And watching him take work before games and even in some of the early Cactus League games, it did not look like Caleb Durbin would be a playable third baseman. By the end of the year, he was markedly above average. That's the power of Matt Erickson, the infield coach, who's only getting a bigger role on his team. It's also just, I think, what good development can still do. If you've got a good athlete who's already low to the ground, especially at third base, where the long throws, you can sort of make those easier by positioning yourself closer to the line. It really doesn't take as strong an arm at third base as people sometimes imagine it does. Yes, the throws are long. Usually you're not moving away from your target as you field the ball, at least with a lot of momentum. He can probably fake it there. The real question is, do they want him to, or is their ideal scenario, because again, this guy has clearly above average speed. The Mets have tried him in center field some already, and that kind of looked just fine. Is maybe the best scenario, he is a medium power plus speed center fielder who's going to bat maybe sixth in your lineup and just fits in really nicely across the board, takes the pressure off Jackson Churio, who can move back to left. I don't know. You can make a good case for that.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up, because it seems like more teams are more open to flipping guys between second and third than they were 10, 15 years ago, where it was always, you need a cannon for an arm at third base. Then maybe somebody got a tape measure and realized how much farther shortstop is away. But you've seen a lot of guys who don't have great arms flip between second and third quite a bit now.
Yeah, and specifically, I think it used to be that teams just envisioned those as two very different athletes, very different body types. A third baseman should be this big, strapping dude, 6'2", that kind of thing. And it's not so much that those big dudes have shown up at second base, certainly not on this side of the shift ban, but those smaller dudes who played second, but you always wondered if they could really handle it at third, it turns out they can. And teams have basically just figured that out now, and more and more of them are showing up.
Yeah, so let's flip on over to Sproat for a little while, and if you could give us a rundown on who Brendan Sproat is.
It's basically your standard issue power arm, by which I do not mean to denigrate him. It's a good thing. He's got a fastball that, again, has touched 100 before. I don't think that's where it's going to sit, but even as a righty, if you're, sitting 96 and pushing 98 as a starter, that's good. the shape is fine. Jake McKibben broke him down really well for us 2 days ago on Brewer Fanatic as one of the players who could headline a return for Freddy Peralta. Good job, Jake. And he mentioned that there's a little bit of an issue, which is very common with guys at this stage. This is not a flaw so much as this is the thing you smooth out when a guy gets really close to the majors. He's got basically 4 pitches, and 2 of them come out of one slot and 2 of them come out of a slightly higher slot. And as is often the case for a guy at this level, the 2 out of one slot aren't the 2 you necessarily want to tunnel together in terms of which handedness of batter they play against.
Yes.
And, so you do need to reconcile those arm slots or create enough deception. Maybe it's by moving him on the rubber. Maybe it's by changing the target that he's throwing to. You got to find a way to increase deception through either manipulation of that arm slot, cleaning up the mechanics, repeating the release point, or changing something about the look the hitter's getting. But it's 4 solid pitches, 2 of us. The slider is going to be, an outgetter, a bat misser. There is a reason that the Brewers got Sproat in this deal and not Nolan McLean or Jonah Tong. Although I think if they'd wanted to, Tong, there was a version of the deal that Tong could have been included in. But Sproat is the 3rd in that trio, but he's still a really high upside arm with Brewers really like that they'll be able to tinker with a bit. Their famous pitching development pipeline. They're going to churn something good out of this guy in relatively short order.
Yeah, one thing that stands out to me just looking at his stat line is he was drafted in the 2nd round of 2023, and his first year in the minors, he pitched 116 innings. Last year, he pitched 121. That's a pretty aggressive wrap-up and a good sign for a young pitcher holding up at that point. He is 25, so he's a little bit on the older side, but still, and you see a lot. Look at Jacob Mizraski. He's not exactly dancing with those kinds of numbers very often.
Yeah, these aren't halved seasons. I mean, he's been getting regular work. He's staying healthy, and as you can see from the height you've seen any video of him, you already know this. Sturdy dude. Like, he's built to wear a good sized workload, kind of like Quinn Priester. So it's a strong pickup, not an ace ceiling. I don't want anybody to get overexcited that way. Put it this way, it would take another significant developmental win for Brandon Sproat to be as good as Freddy Peralta has been the last couple of years. That's probably not going to happen, but he can still be a solid contributor for several seasons for this team. And because of the extra financial flexibility it gives the Brewers, and again, that longer team control, that comes out as a win transactionally.
Absolutely. I mean, you look at the Corbin Burns deal, and yeah, you're not getting that peak value that maybe you hoped out of it. But even in Joey Ortiz's diminished state, he's still a rather valuable player overall.
Yep.
So, do you have anything else to say on Williams or Sproat before we kind of close this up? I have one question for you that I'm sure Brewers fans will be very excited about.
I don't think so. We'll have more on the site about them in the coming days, obviously.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, check out. I mean, whenever something like this happens in the Brewer Fanatic Slack, everyone pops out of the woodwork and is like, I want to write this angle, that angle. We're going to have 6 Freddy Peralta related pieces over the next 3-4 days. So we're going to have a ton of content. But in parting, Matt, does this give the Cubs the edge in 2026? Cubs had a hell of a 2-week run there, where they got Bregman, they got Cabrera, but who knows what you're actually going to get out of Cabrera with that arm. I mean, he's immensely talented, but not very reliable.
I think the Cubs had a pretty significant gap to close this winter.
Yeah.
I don't think they came in, even though the Cubs pushed up to a much higher win total than in the past, this year, and they played a relatively close, a strange but ultimately a very close NLDS against each other. My feeling is that the Brewers were a clear step ahead, that the Cubs had to make up. They have taken a step forward. I don't think the Brewers have really taken the step back that the national media, I mean, folks who are listening to this, you guys are not only smart fans, but the Brewers. So that they don't make a trade like this thinking they're taking a step back.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they lost their ace, their top pitcher, but they got even deeper in what's already a deep unit, and they've given themselves more upside on the positional side. And I just think we're going to see so much progress from some of the Brewers' young players like Jackson Chourio. I believe a lot more in Jackson Chourio than I do in Pete Crow Armstrong.
I agree with that. Absolutely. I mean, PCA has some really significant holes that need to be addressed before I can't even say take a step forward. Like if he patches those holes, it could be a leap forward with him. Sure. But there's a lower chance of Jackson Chourio is just going to get older. He's going to get bigger. He's going to get more experienced. He's just going to get better. And he doesn't have refinement of skill mostly at this point, in my opinion.
I just think he's got more feel to hit, more sort of, PCA is a great fielder, but I just think Chourio can have an impact in more dimensions. And I mentioned those two specifically because I do think the Cubs have closed the gap so far. I think both teams have a couple more moves before opening day, but the Cubs have closed that gap. So it's going to come down to some of those variances, some of those places where we have a projection, but where in the error bars do those players fall? And my faith on all of the key guys with the wide error bars on each team, I just favor the Brewers slightly. So I still think they have the edge. I think that edge has shrunk, but I don't think it's gone yet.
No, and where the Brewers do have way more depth behind. I mean, you can't say the bench is what killed last year's Cubs, but it was a significant player in what killed last year's Cubs. And the Cubs might have a little bit better bench, but it's nothing like the depth that the Brewers can sport on either the pitching or hitting side of things.
Well, and speaking of error bars and depth, just that like 95th percentile outcome where a young who you weren't even really expecting to help you this year explodes on the scene and does something impressive. That could be the Brewers like 4 different ways.
Yeah.
It could be the Cubs in exactly one way. And even that is I think
Ballesteros.
Well, I'm almost counting Ballesteros because the Cubs are counting on Ballesteros at this point.
Okay.
He's sort of penciled into their lineup. What I mean is they could get from Jackson Wiggins
Wiggins
rookie season on the mound.
Sure.
But that again can happen to the Brewers in so many more ways. They've got and I'm not expecting to see Jesus Made this year. I'm not expecting Jeff Williams to play 100 games in the majors this year. But those things are, to me, just as likely as Jackson Wiggins having a big, Cade Horton-like impact on the 2026 Cubs. So I just think the Brewers having a stronger, not only is their big league roster deeper, their whole organization is deeper in this way that I think it's just going to tell over the course of the season.
Yeah, and coming back second season from shoulder surgery, Caro could be a huge impact. He could potentially shift Contreras more to a DH role if he's hitting and, behind the dish, which could help Contreras immensely later in the season. He loves to work himself like a dog, and then you could tell the guy just doesn't have a lot left by the time October rolls around.
Yeah, I wonder if Murph's going to win some of those arguments this year.
I hope so, yeah. Okay, well, that's about all I have, unless you have anything left to say, Matt?
Not right now, man. Let's go find out what comes next. I do.
Yeah.
The last thing I want to say is the Brewers saved basically a full $8 million here. Be interesting to see how they spend it.
That's a really good point.
They're just saving that money. you can understand it given the stuff around the changing TV revenue, all of that. But my sense has been that if they did trade him, they felt like they were going to be able to replace that money on this year's payroll. Maybe that's changed because the TV stuff has changed just in the last week or two. But I think there's another, they could turn around now and go find that really nice end game free agent that Matt Arnold also does that really well. With the money that he saves from trades of people like Corbin Burns, now Freddy Peralta.
Definitely. Okay, well, pop into Brewer Fanatic, brewerfanatic.com. We're going to have a ton of Freddy Peralta related stuff. We're going to break down Williams. We're going to break down Sproat. We're going to look at this. What's a Brewer? Somebody's working on what's a Brewer rotation look like now? What are the projections going to do? With the removal of Peralta. We're going to have a ton of content. Just swing by the site and check it out. But until then, thanks for checking out the Brewer Fanatic live stream. Bye, everybody.